Hello, Talbot County Democrats. Hello. What an honor it is. Back home in Montgomery County, I know we must have some people here who retired from MoCo, right, and came down here, but we've got a few. But, it's not that difficult to be a Democrat. In fact, it's so easy to be a Democrat that the Republicans become Democrats if they want to run for office, right? And so here, to be a Democrat on the Eastern Shore, you got to know why you're a Democrat. You got to believe in being a Democrat. And so that's why when you call me up and ask me to come down to Easton or Talbot County or anywhere on the shore, including Chestertown, where Heather and Deb live, which is right near where I went to Echo Hill Camp every summer of my life. I don't know if you've got any Echo Hill people out there. But I come because I know, you're the only Marylanders who don't have a Democratic member of Congress, and so you are the responsibility of the rest of ours. And I've seen some people here tonight who were at the town hall meeting that I did for Andy Harris. I just said, look, if your name is on the ballot, your face should not be on the milk carton. Because meeting with your constituents, even if they disagree with you strongly, is part of the job. That's what it means to be a representative. The people your constituents are like members of you. They are a constituent part of you. You can't forget that. You can't go, home and hide under your sofa or your couch. So I was very proud to be in that gymnasium with 1,500 people, and that was a great event. And then I went on to do 5 or 6 others of those, and I'm going to keep doing them. Our colleagues across the aisle are not meeting with their constituents. And so that tells you something is wrong with their votes and their policies. If you're stripping Medicaid coverage from millions of people, if you're tearing down the Affordable Care Act tax credits that make it possible for people to get health insurance, no, you're not going to be able to face your constituents. And if you can't face your constituents, there's something wrong with what you're voting for. Yes. And you've got to understand that. Well, look. We are all here, or most of us anyway, are here as true blue, dyed-in-the-wool Democrats. But I wanted to start on a bipartisan note tonight by invoking our last great Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, who spoke of a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And of course, we didn't start out that way. We started as a slave republic of white male property owners over the age of 21. But it's been through successive waves of social and political struggle and constitutional amendment and expansion that we've come to something much closer to approximating Lincoln's beautiful, tantalizing ideal. We've gotten a lot closer to becoming a more perfect union. If you read the 17 amendments that we've passed since the original Bill of Rights the way that I do, then the vast majority of our constitutional amendments and the whole trajectory of our constitutional development is based on greater democratization. Sometimes my Republican colleagues will get up on the floor whenever I'm speaking, and they say, Raskin keeps talking about a democracy. We're not a democracy, we're a republic, they say. Well, first of all, a republic is just a representative democracy. It means that we can't fit 300 million people into the House of Representatives or into the school board meetings, so we elect people to go and do it for us. But if what they mean is, well, we were a slave republic of white male property owners, we've moved away from that. Look at all the amendments we've gotten. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, at least outside of prison. The 14th Amendment gave us equal protection and due process in America. The 15th Amendment banned race discrimination in voting. The 17th Amendment shifted the mode of election of U.S. senators from the legislatures to the people. The 19th Amendment doubled the franchise in America by giving women the right to vote in our country. The 23rd Amendment gave our friends in Washington, D.C. at least the right to participate in presidential elections. The 24th Amendment banned poll taxes in America, and the 26th Amendment lowered the voting age to 18. The entire trajectory of our historical and constitutional development has been towards greater democracy. That's the true story of America. That's what Trump and MAGA are rebelling against. They want to turn the clock back, but we've got to keep going. In Democracy in America, Tocqueville observed, he said that in this country, voting rights and democracy seem to be always expanding and growing, or they're contracting and they're shrinking. Well, we've been contracting and shrinking with all of the voter suppression tactics, with the disenfranchisement. We've been voting and shrinking with the gerrymandering of our elections, where the politicians choose the voters before the voters choose the politicians. We've been shrinking. We've got to get democracy back on the growth track in America. Okay? And what does that mean? One of the things it means is statehood. And I'm not talking about Greenland and Canada and Panama. I'm talking about statehood for Washington, D.C. This is the last national capital on planet Earth that can't vote for and is not represented in their own parliament, in their own legislature. 2 and 3 Congresses ago, we voted along party lines, unfortunately, but the Democrats voted and passed D.C. statehood out of the House of Representatives. It didn't go through the Senate. And I got to be the floor leader on that. And when I got up, I started by thanking the people of Washington. 713,000 tax-paying, draftable American citizens who have a bona fide, valid grievance against the Congress of the United States, but didn't come down and beat the daylights out of our police officers, storm the Capitol, drive the members of the House and Senate out of their chambers, and nearly assassinate the Vice President. They've done it the right way. They've had a statehood constitutional convention. They're asking for admission to the Union. We should grant them admission to the Union. We got 3.5 million U.S. citizens in Puerto Rico who have learned the bitter price of colonial disenfranchisement as recently as Hurricane Maria, when Donald Trump went over there and made a whole bunch of promises and cheated them out of hundreds of millions of dollars in federal aid that any state would have gotten, and then threw a bunch of scrap paper towels at them instead. And so we need to put Puerto Rican statehood and D.C. statehood on the agenda for their sake and for our sake too. 2025, it's time for us to start electing the President of the United States the way we elect governors and representatives and senators and mayors and everybody else. Whoever gets the most votes wins. How about that? How about that? Electoral College has given us 5 popular vote losers in our history as president. Twice in this century, in 2000, in the highly disputed and dubious result in Bush versus Gore in 2000, and again in 2016, when Hillary, never forget it, beat Donald Trump by more than 2.5 million votes. Okay, the Electoral College is an accident waiting to happen every 4 years, and these days it can get you killed, as we saw on January 6th, 2021. Let's just have an election and see who gets the most votes. How about that? So, my friends, we've got to be moving forward. The world's counting on us, right? The people of Ukraine are counting on us, fighting off that filthy, bloody, imperialist invasion by Vladimir Putin. Our grandparents, they knew which side of the street America had to be on when fascists were marching down the boulevard or were invading other people's countries. We've got to be on the side of democracy and freedom all over the world. All over the world. So, everything is under attack. I don't need to tell you that. We're in the fight of our lives. We're in the fight of our lives right now. Every part of the Constitution is under attack. Beginning with the preamble, which the rabbi cited, I believe. We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and reserve to ourselves and our posterity the blessings of liberty, do hereby ordain and establish the Constitution of these United States. And the very next sentence, the first sentence of Article 1, says, all legislative power is vested in a Congress of the United States. The lawmaking power of the people, which established the Constitution and our nation, flowed immediately in a Congress. And then you get page after page after page of all the powers of Congress. We've got the power to declare war. Donald Trump says we're at war with Venezuela. No, we're not. We didn't declare war in Venezuela. Right? It's not up to him. It's not up to their Signal chat group. It's not up to Tulsi Gabbard. It's up to the representatives of the people. The framers understood the kings were always plunging their people into wars of vanity and pique and imperial adventure and conceit. They wanted something as serious and as life and death as going to war to be reposed only in the hands of the representatives of the people. We've got the power to pass taxes and tariffs, not the president, because we've got the power to regulate commerce among the states and with foreign nations, which is why the Court of International Trade have struck down these illegal, unconstitutional tariffs, and why they were struck down again by the Federal Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit in D.C. No president has ever attempted to unilaterally impose tariffs on foreign countries, much less to do them for reasons that aren't even economic in nature. I mean, we've got a $4 billion trade surplus with Brazil, and Trump imposed a 50% tariff on Brazil. Why? Well, it had nothing to do with trade. It had nothing to do with economics. It was because he was mad that they were actually holding Bolsonaro accountable for copying Donald Trump and trying to have a violent insurrection against his own government. No, you don't have the power to impose tariffs. If anybody's going to do it, it is the representatives of the people in Congress. We've got that power. Straight through Article 1, every power you can imagine. You get to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, and all other powers necessary and proper to the execution of the foregoing powers. You get through all that. Then you get to Article 2, which is like this big, okay? And the main paragraph says, a president shall be removed from office upon impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. Okay? Well, what's the core job of the president? What is the job of the president? Well, Commander-in-Chief, not incidentally of the nation or of the government, Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy and militias when called into actual service. When there's a war, to be Commander-in-Chief there. So what's the job of the president? Very simple. It's right there in Article 2. To take care that the laws are faithfully executed. To take care that the laws are faithfully executed. Not frustrated, not defeated, not diverted, not impounded, not redirected, not rechanneled, not shut down. To take care that the laws are faithfully executed. All we say to Donald Trump is do your job. Yeah. Do your job and faithfully execute the laws that have been passed by the people. And that's what Article 3 is all about. That's why we have a court. It's emphatically the province of the duty of the judicial department to say what the law is, said Chief Justice Marshall in Marbury versus Madison. And this is a little-known secret of the time we live in, but there have been more than 400 cases brought against Donald Trump in this reign of lawlessness and terror across the country, and in more than 90% of the cases in district courts, those judges, Republican and Democratic appointees alike, have decided against Donald Trump. And roughly the same numbers in the appeals courts as well. The rule of law is holding, Donald Trump is losing, until you get to just one court, There's one court that has been packed and stacked and sliced and diced and gerrymandered to his advantage and to his liking, which is the Supreme Court. Then they get the cases into their so-called emergency docket, the shadow docket, where they have a one sentence or one paragraph overruling of what's taken place below. That's a serious problem that we've got to deal with. But I want people to know that if you read the opinions, it's very clear from the very first executive order, the vast majority of these things are unconstitutional and illegal. The first executive order purported to strip people of birthright citizenship in America. That's the very first sentence of the 14th Amendment. It says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. It couldn't be more plain. And then he says, no, being born in America is not enough to be a citizen. We want to know who your grandparents were. We want to know who your great-grandparents were. We want to know your whole lineage. I mean, come on. This has been settled for 3 centuries, right? In the 21st, the 20th, the 19th, this has been settled, and yet he's lost in 4 different courts, 2 Republican judges, 2 Democratic judges. The Reagan judge said, I've been on the court for more than 4 decades. This is the easiest constitutional case I've ever seen in my life. He said, you don't need to be a lawyer to understand this. You just have to know how to read. Read the first sentence, and it's totally clear, right? We win in the appeals court, then it gets up to the Supreme Court, where they slice the bologna very fine. Well, we're not going to reach the merits of the substance because these district courts issued nationwide injunctions. Yeah, it's a national issue. Well, we're going to decide for the first time in American history, one district court cannot issue a nationwide injunction, even though they basically majored in that during the Biden administration. They went to that one right-wing judge down in Texas. They were lined up around the block to get him to issue all of the rulings about birth control and abortion and so on. Anyway, so now that issue is not settled yet, despite the fact that it's settled in the district courts and it's settled in the appeals courts. Well, my friends, the reason we're defending the Constitution, it's not even about the separation of powers, although that's central, but it's about the Bill of Rights. And the rights and the freedoms of the people are under attack. Every day, the freedom of speech is under attack. We got to celebrate the big victory over the Trump administration with Jimmy Kimmel. That was a big win. That was a big win. People say to me, well, you're talking a lot about that, but that's just about a comedian. That's just about comedy. Can I tell you something? Comedy's important. There are tens of millions of people who've been staying alive and staying hopeful because they watch the late night talk show hosts, right? Because if you can laugh about a president, which certainly they love to do about Obama and Biden and so on, if you can laugh about a president, you don't have to be afraid of a president. You don't have to live in fear of a president. There's somebody coming violating your rights. So that was an important win. But the freedom of speech is under attack everywhere. The law firms are under attack. They want to make it so you can't even find a lawyer when they're violating your rights because the law firms all have to go work for them. Donald Trump started off with an executive order saying, I don't like this firm, I don't like that firm, I don't like that firm. This guy, had a relationship with Mueller, and so I'm going to ban 1,000 lawyers at their firm from entering a federal building. Check that out. Telling lawyers they can't even go to a federal courthouse. We're going to strip you of security clearance, he said. We're going to deny you ever the ability to get a federal job or a federal contract. And a lot of law firms backed down, including some of the biggest ones in the country, like Paul Weiss. But some of the law firms stood up, like Wilmer Hale, stood up, Perkins Coie stood up, and they said, we know the Constitution. Okay? You're violating the First Amendment. You're violating due process. You're violating the right to a fair trial. You're violating the right to have a representative in court, to have a lawyer working for you, and they've been winning. And the ones who backed down and capitulated are, to their shame, working for the Trump administration every day against the people in all of these cases. So, the same thing is taking place with colleges and universities. Donald Trump wants to tell them who they can admit as students, who's going to be on the faculty, and what they can teach, right? And the ones who've been willing to fight, like Harvard University, they've been winning in court. They've been winning in court too. But you see, the academic freedom is under attack. Freedom of speech is under attack. Freedom of association is under attack. And of course, religious free exercise, the separation of church and state are under vicious attack every day. You know, one of my colleagues got up 7 weeks ago. He said, the moral downfall of America was in 1962 in Engel versus Vitale when the Supreme Court banned prayer in the public schools. And I got up, I said, you know what? The Supreme Court never banned prayer in the public schools. As long as there are pop math quizzes, there will be prayer in the public schools, okay? Anybody can pray whenever he or she wants to pray. It's just the government cannot write a script and compel your children to participate in it. But it doesn't end with these people. You saw Texas and Louisiana. They just voted to endorse the 10 Commandments, to post the 10 Commandments. They didn't say which version, because there are more than 100 different versions of the 10 Commandments, but to post the 10 Commandments in every classroom, right? I knew it was going to happen. So my MAGA colleagues show up in the Judiciary Committee, the Oversight Committee. We've got to endorse the 10 Commandments. We've got to post the 10 Commandments. Really, I say, the 10 Commandments have been doing fine for millennia without an endorsement from the U.S. House of Representatives and the Freedom Caucus. One guy says no. But he said the 10 Commandments are the basis for the Bill of Rights. And I was puzzled. I was kind of thrown off. I said, you're right. I know there's 10 in each one and everything. But let's take a test case. The first commandment says, thou shalt have no other God before me. The First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, nor prohibiting the free exercise thereof. How does this one dictate that one? But they insist we go up to the Rules Committee, where my friend Chairman McGovern, they want an up or down vote on the House floor on the 10 Commandments. I say, you know what? If we're going to have a vote on the 10 Commandments in 2025, we should have to vote on each commandment separately. Okay? And not that omnibus package they want to get away with. And you shouldn't be able to vote for any commandment you yourself have ever violated in your life. Because then we'll be taking the name of the Lord in vain in the process. So one of my colleagues told me I was making a mockery of the whole thing. I said, you guys are making a mockery of the whole thing. Your legislation is not only unconstitutional, it's blasphemous at the exact same time, which is pretty remarkable. My friends, it's all under attack. Due process is under attack. The two most beautiful words in the Constitution, maybe the two most beautiful words in the English language, because they separate our freedoms and our rights from arbitrary state power, right? Due process. One of my colleagues says to me, wait a second, you're not talking about due process for guilty people, are you? So I'm like, that's the whole point. You don't know whether they're guilty until they've had due process. Nobody does, unless you think government is infallible, which is usually not what we hear from our friends across the aisle. And so, this is why we're in a situation where you've got masked officers driving unmarked cars, conducting warrantless arrests of people, including citizens of the United States. That's not the America I grew up in. That's not the America I remember, and it's certainly not an America I want to live in. We've got to stop the trampling of the Bill of Rights and the rights of the people. All right, my friends, I'm proud to be a Democrat these days. Yeah. I hope you guys are proud to be a Democrat. I hope you are. My friend, my colleague, Lauren Boebert, she, like others in her party, unfortunately, she demonstrates this strange inability to correctly pronounce the name of our party in its adjectival form, right? So if, Pelosi gets up and makes a speech, then they say, well, that Democrat congresswoman with her Democrat bill and her Democrat speech And for 7 years, I would get up and I'd say, you know what? Democrat is the noun, okay? Democratic is the adjective. You've got to talk about the Democratic Congresswoman with her Democratic bill and her Democratic amendments. And we got into a little thing about it on the floor. Then all the Republicans were rushing in, Chip Roy and Jim Jordan, all of them, they decided to pile on. Democrat this, Democrat that. They knew it was driving me crazy. I lost my temper. I said, you know what? You guys have this self-imposed political speech impediment, apparently. And it's contagious. It's coming over to our side. Now, when I try to say the name of your party, it just comes out the Banana Republican Party, the Banana Republican Congresswoman, Banana Republican bill. And I went home and I told my wife, because she knew how much this bugged me. And I told her, and Sarah said, that was an extremely immature response. But the thing was, I was reading this great book at the time, which I recommend to all of you, called About FDR by the great Texas historian H.W. Brands. And it's called Traitor to His Class. But I learned something remarkable about Franklin D. Roosevelt, which is that he didn't call our party the Democratic Party, much less the Democrat Party. He called our party, with a capital D, the Democracy. The Democracy. And he may have gotten it from Andrew Jackson, I don't know, but he said, the economic royalists, the plutocrats, say invest in the wealthiest people in society and just let some of the wealth dribble down on everybody else. But the democracy says, invest in the great American working middle class. We will all rise and prosper together. That's the doctrine of the democracy, said FDR. So now, when they can't pronounce the name of our party correctly, they say, just do what FDR and Eleanor Roosevelt did. Just call us the democracy. Because that's what we are these days. We are the only party that will stand up for everybody's right to vote, even if you're not going to vote for us. And we're standing up for people in Ukraine. And we're standing up for democracy and human rights against the autocrats and the dictators all over the world. That's who we are. We are the democracy. Say that in a narrow or parochial way, because I want us to be a big party. I believe we are the party of the majority. I went to a goodbye party for one of my congressional colleagues who left during the first administration, a Republican named Trey Gowdy, and he left, and I went to say goodbye to him, and then we did little toasts, and then he was talking about people, and he said, Raskin, you're not a bad guy. The problem with you is you're a liberal. And I said, I'm going to clean this up, Rabbi. You're darn right I'm a liberal. I said, you're darn right I'm a liberal. The heart of that word is liberty. And I'm a progressive because the heart of that word is progress. But my favorite thing to call myself these days is a conservative. You know why? I want to conserve the land, the air, the water, the climate system, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the National Labor Relations Act, the Fair Labor Standards Act, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. Everything their party of nihilists wants to destroy is everything we're going to destroy in America. So I'll leave you, my friends, with a little sampler of thoughts from some of the great democracy patriots who are keeping me going these days. One of them, I just finished Navalny's book. I don't know if you guys have read Navalny's book called Patriot. It's beautiful, but he said something in there when he was writing in prison, and it just destroys me to think about the fact that he went back to Russia when he was free, and he could have stayed out, but he went back to fight for freedom and democracy in his country. And from prison, he wrote us this book. And there's a passage in there where he says, when people say to him, what can they do? He says, you can do and you must do what they fear the most, because authoritarianism is built on lies. You must tell the truth about your life and the lives of people around you. You must tell the truth about what's going on in our country. You must tell the truth about the fact that they are wasting the potential and the opportunity of our country to move forward. So don't forget about Navalny, who's a real hero during this period, and he's fighting the same enemies we're fighting. Because all the dictators and all the autocrats have found each other. And don't ever think for a moment that Donald Trump is not on the same team as Vladimir Putin and the rest of them. You know, he called the mayoral candidate, he called Mamdani a communist. And they said, that's interesting, because the only communist I'm aware of on earth are Donald Trump's best friends. Kim Jong-un, he writes love letters to. The Stalinist dictator of North Korea, they exchange love letters all the time, and Trump brags about it. Vladimir Putin was the head of the KGB, who said the greatest catastrophe of the 20th century was not the Holocaust, it was the collapse of the Soviet Union. Right? And President Xi, he commends all the time. If he's got a problem with the Democratic Socialist, it's not the Socialist Party he's got a problem with, it's the Democratic Party he's got a problem with. It's the Democracy Party he's got a problem with. Well, anyway, I'll leave you with the words of two other great patriots for democracy. One, Frederick Douglass, who was born down the road at the Wye River Plantation. Born into slavery, who escaped from slavery to become our great freedom fighter through the Civil War, through Reconstruction. And Douglass said, he said, if there's no struggle, there's no progress. And the struggle may be moral, it may be physical, it may be moral and physical, but there must be struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. There's a message to you from a fellow Marylander from the 19th century. I'll leave you finally with the words of the great Tom Paine, who our son Tommy was named after. And Tom Paine got over here 2 years before the American Revolution in 1774. He fell in love with the promise of America. He said, if this land lives up to its values and its principles, he said it will become an asylum to humanity. Not an insane asylum, but a place of refuge for people seeking freedom from political and religious and intellectual repression from all over the world. And then he wrote the great pamphlet of our history, Common Sense, which ignited the American Revolution. And by common sense, he meant there are the 5 senses that we are born with if we are lucky. And the 6th sense, the sense we have in common, he said, when we're willing to speak and reason together towards common solutions without dogma and superstition, or what we would call today propaganda and dogma and fake news and disinformation and all of that. But anyway, 1776, that was a tough year for everybody. We like to think that the country was unified. Everybody was for the revolution, not at all. I'm reading another book by H.W. Brands about this, called The First Civil War, about how the American Revolution was really like a civil war. It split the country right down the middle. Ben Franklin's son was the governor of New Jersey, who went to jail for siding with King George. But a lot of the smart money was on the British Empire. Half the people were running around saying, how are you going to beat the most powerful empire that's ever existed, that's never lost a war? How are you going to disentangle church and state when the governments have always run religion in their own interests? How are you going to do that with a bunch of disparate colonies strewn all over this continent? And half the people are saying, let's just give it a try. Let's try to put government on the basis of the consent of the governed. Let's invoke the fact that all of us are born equal. Let's proceed on the premise that we have unalienable rights to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Let's pledge to each other our property, our lives, our sacred honor in order to make that happen. And so Paine wanted to write another pamphlet in 1776 to give people hope during a very dark period where all the smart money was on the dictators. All the smart money was on the autocrats. It was on the bullies and the tyrants. For all of human history, people had lived under people like Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump and Viktor Orban. That was the fate of humanity, right? And he wanted to give people some hope. And he wrote this beautiful pamphlet called The American Crisis. And so I just want to quote a tiny little passage for you. I will update the language pursuant to strict instructions from Nancy Pelosi, who told me Tom Paine was a feminist and he wouldn't mind if he did that. And he was fighting for women's voting rights back in the 18th century, so I think it's fair. But he said, These are the times that try men and women's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will shrink at this moment from the service of their cause in their country. But everyone that stands with us now will win the love and the favor and the affection of every man and every woman for all time. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, but we have this saving consolation. The more difficult the struggle, the more glorious in the end will be our victory. Let's make that victory ours, Eastern Shore Democrats. Thank you for having me tonight.